so we are now ready to start again, to resume our meeting, and we move into the discussion about the survey to stakeholders about EMA perception. And I'm very happy to introduce Christopher Gadd, that is the head of online communication, and he will guide us through the results of the survey. Christopher?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you to those of you who completed the survey last September. You might see some of your own responses coming up on the screen. Yeah, as was already stated, I'm Chris Gadd. I run the online communication team, and I'm representing the communication department, who run a survey every 2 years to see how we're doing in terms of communication and engagement with our main stakeholders and partners. So I'll say a bit about the survey to begin with and give you some key highlights. Go into a little bit more detail on the main findings, but I stress a little bit, it's a large survey, so I can only show you a few tantalizing bits of information, but not much depth in the time available. Having said that, you will be able to see the report afterwards, which will be sent in the postmail. There'll be some areas for improvement, and then we've got a few questions for a discussion at the end. So what is the Communication Perception Survey? Well, as I mentioned, it's a large survey of 87 questions, 22 of which are qualitative. So we get you to work hard for this survey, and we run it every 2 years so we can see how we're doing. We can gauge the perception of our communication and engagement activities and compare that over time. It also enables us to identify challenges and also opportunities, and also, of course, to improve things and make things better as we move forward. The main topics we always cover, with the obvious exception of COVID-19, which was a one-off, are our openness and transparency, the types of materials and tools that we use, our main channels, such as the corporate website on the communication side, and our engagement. We focus on checking how we're doing with engagement with our partners in national competent authorities, and of course, with stakeholders such as yourselves. I forgot to mention at the beginning, I'm a little bit under the weather today, and I apologize if my voice doesn't quite hold up until the end, but I'll do my best. So here's a fuller group of the fuller listing of the groups that the 375 responders fell into. I don't think there are any surprises there, but it's safe to say that our target audiences were represented in the answers that we got. And this is the division of those across the respondents. So the big blue section on the left of stakeholders is pharmaceutical industry and the human domain. We always tend to find around 50% of responses to general surveys fall into that category. And you'll find yourselves in there somewhere, let me see, 5% of the responses, so thank you very much. On the right, the vast majority are national competent authorities in the pale blue, and the darker blue is EU institutions, with a few others making up the rest. So in terms of the key highlights, we are pleased to see that there is still a high satisfaction in general with our communication, and amongst the people who answered the survey, our products and channels are widely known and used. It's probably worth pointing out here, this isn't a general survey of all EU citizens, but it's directly targeted at our main stakeholders and partners through our existing channels. So we try and get as broad a response as possible, but we're not trying to gauge perception amongst the general population, but amongst the people that we know we communicate and engage with on a regular basis. The awareness of our digital and social media platforms varies according to the groups. And many of the respondents are actively involved in disseminating or otherwise using our communication materials, and we'll come on to that point in a bit more detail later. We're pleased to see that of the respondents, around half claim that they read them at least once a week, which is higher than we might otherwise expect, and a quarter even share them at least once a week. In terms of quality, the vast majority of respondents were positive, and most agreed that the agency is open and transparent. And when it comes to engagement, over half of the respondents agreed the EMA engages sufficiently with stakeholders such as yourselves. This survey is also sent to our list of journalists, and in that domain, the journalists who responded claimed that the communication with them had improved or much improved in recent years. In terms of coordination, which is really looking at national competent authorities and other bodies in the EU regulatory network, that was rated as efficient. So looking in a bit more detail at some of the findings, I think this is one of our kind of key pieces of information here, that with these stakeholders and partners who we targeted in this communication perception survey, almost all of them say that the information we provide is indispensable for their organization or important. So these people have a really close relationship with us. So it's important for us that we meet their needs in terms of communication and engagement. This shows how these respondents use the material that we prepare. And as you can see, it's dominated by work-related uses, which is probably no surprise. Looking in a bit more detail at the types of use, how organizations use information, there are 3 levels we currently reflect in the survey. One is simply reading, the second is to disseminate the information further, and the third to reproduce it or somehow reuse it in the organization's own communication materials. So we're pleased to see that the difference between the 3 levels is not so large, which is encouraging, and it's normal that we would see a greater proportion of respondents reading over disseminating and reproducing. We've also broken this down by the category that the respondent put themselves in. The numbers get a bit small, but I've highlighted the ones that may be of interest for you. So healthcare professional organizations, you said that 38% of the time you read the materials at least once a week, disseminate 13% of the time once a week, and perhaps we'll skip over the number for reproducing, but we can talk about that in a minute. These are the types of ways that organizations typically across all groups do disseminate the information. So it might be internally on intranets, for example, but also externally social media on websites and other channels. I think for the first time this year, there was a question specifically about what we call the audience landing pages on our corporate website. If you're not familiar with these, you can find them about halfway down the homepage. And they're a bit like an alternative homepage for specific audiences. There are 6 of them, and one of them is for healthcare professionals. And so we're interested in just seeing how often the respondents claim to look at this page, which we would find interesting in deciding how to use it in the future. Now, I want to emphasize this is individual healthcare professionals responding and not people who are representing healthcare professional organizations. You can see that the healthcare professionals who responded said they looked at the website at least once a month, 42% of them, over 24% for the general respondents. So something seems to be working there in terms of attracting individual healthcare professionals to that page. Going back to more general findings, we were delighted to see that there was a high rating for our general question, how do you rate EMA's external communication, with most rating it positively or very positively. And in terms of engagement, similarly positive feedback there. Always room for improvement, of course, but we were pleased to see these high levels again, which were comparable to previous years. In terms of comparing the engagement with stakeholders with that of similar authorities, we were also delighted to see that on average it was rated as good as, or in some cases better at engaging with stakeholders than the comparators. There are a few quotes here. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any from a healthcare professional organisation, but hopefully you will resonate with some of these. Is it all right if I leave you a minute or two to read them through, or is it too small to read yourselves? I can read some of them out if necessary.
Yeah, we are reading. We've done.
Okay, so hopefully you'll agree with some of those. But of course, everything isn't positive. That would be a very unusual situation, and we're always looking to improve and identify from this survey where we can do better. Now we've got 8 areas for improvement. They're quite broad, but some of these may resonate with you. So a comment we often, or an outcome we often find is there's always a drive to tailor communications to meet the needs of different audience groups. In particular, it was partners in the EU regulatory networks, such as EU institutions in this survey that came out as a group that could do with better targeted communication. In terms of engaging researchers in academia, there was a definite trend that more activity in this area is needed to make sure that those groups understand what EMA does and know how to engage with EMA. And that reflects a trend we've seen for a few years now. A couple of platforms and tools were pulled out as having a low level of knowledge and recognition. Firstly, our YouTube channel, where not only our corporate videos, but videos of events, I think hundreds, if not thousands of videos on that channel, awareness was fairly low. And rather surprisingly, knowledge of the Ask EMA service, so the query service and the service through which you can request information or access to documents, also was lower than we expected. The final point, I think, reflects a question which was concerning whether it would be helpful to have all of our audiovisual and visual materials available in one place on our website, so that organizations or individuals could have a page or an area of one of our websites where they can go and pick up those materials and use them for themselves. Currently, our strategy is to use the information on the page where it's relevant for the topic and not to have a repository in one place, but it's certainly something we're considering following the results of this survey. An area for improvement that often comes up and one we are striving to meeting is to produce more in other languages than English. And that's something we're working on already. There were various calls to improve the structure, design and functionalities of the website to help with navigation and ease of use. There was calls for even more visual materials, particularly, I think, following the materials we produced during the COVID pandemic explaining the rapid authorization of vaccines. And finally, expediting the publication of video recordings of workshops and public meetings. There was a clear trend that we sometimes take a little too long to get those final video recordings out in the public domain. So it was very much a whistle-stop tour of the main points and some things of relevance for you. But as I said, the full report will be available in due course. But we just had a few questions that we'd like to pose to you to stimulate a discussion. So to begin with, do any of these findings surprise you, or perhaps do they resonate with you? Secondly, what can we do to increase dissemination and reuse of EMA's content and materials? We noted that the rate of dissemination was fairly low, but there was no claimed reuse of EMA's materials. So is it something we can improve? Is it something you need to tell us you can improve? Is there something you can tell us that we could do to fix things quickly, or is it too much information? Do you have any feedback for us that would help us produce materials that you can reuse? And finally, what can you do as a group to increase reach and engagement with audiences in EU countries relating to EMA's work on the basis of the communication and engagement materials we provide for you? So that's it from me, and over to you for the discussion.
Thank you so much, Christopher. And thanks also for helping me with this question, and thanks, very appreciated. So basically what I suggest is that maybe we can listen to the other presentation from Julie about the survey, and maybe then we can have the discussion at the end, if this is okay with you. So, Bear, I saw that you raise your hand while Julia is preparing for for her presentation. Is that anything that you can keep for later, or do you want to say now?
No, on slide 6, I saw on the overview that there were two, that the industry was one big bulk, while the healthcare professionals were two slots. Why are they not combined on slide 6?
I'll check that for you, but I didn't make the slide myself, so I'll have to check with the colleague who did. It could be individual healthcare professionals versus organisations, perhaps, but I'll double check for you. If I can find anything before the meeting's up, I'll let you know.
Okay, good that you asked the question now, so we can answer it later. Julia, if you are now ready to present us the results from the satisfaction survey. Julia,
Sure.
over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, as some of you might know, we run a satisfaction survey amongst our eligible organizations this year. And I take this opportunity to present to you an overview of the results of this survey. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I need to familiarize myself with the mouse. Okay, this is not going to work, right? Apologies, huh? There you go. So the satisfaction survey, the aim of the satisfaction survey is really to get an understanding of the evolving perceptions amongst our eligible organizations and the needs in terms of engagement activities. For the healthcare professional organizations, it's really a bit of a follow-up exercise from our previous satisfaction survey, which was launched in 2020, kind of during the pandemic, and was our first opportunity to gauge kind of a baseline of where we were going in terms of how well we were doing in your eyes in terms of engagement activities. This year, we also run the survey for patient and consumer organizations, and we will see a little bit of a comparison of the results later in the presentation. As you may be aware, then it was 38 organizations that were surveyed, amongst which the 28 members of the healthcare professional working parties that are sat in this room or following from home. The survey goals, as I've already partly mentioned, are to assess the organization's satisfaction with our activities, to gather also more punctual feedback on our interactions, to understand how we're doing, but also where we're going, because ultimately the point of asking you for feedback is to be able to somewhat improve our engagement activities with you. And the survey ran from the 21st of February to the 24th of March, 2023. So let's start with a breakdown of the participants. You see a response rate of 45%, which is slightly lower than our previous survey, but overall comparable, with the majority of participants, a good 14 participants, represented in the healthcare professional working party. So yes, as you will see in the 2020 survey, we had 61% responders, whereas the response rate from healthcare professional working parties members was more or less comparable. The first kind of the most overarching question of the survey was really simply how satisfied are you with the current level of engagement with EMA? And I think overall we can see that the levels of satisfaction are pretty high. Participants were asked to rate their satisfaction level on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all satisfied and 5 being very satisfied. And over 85% of participants scored as satisfied or very satisfied, with a few answers in the moderately satisfied category. And picking up a little bit from the comments that were left to this question, kind of elaborating the reasoning behind the answer, we kind of understood that generally there was quite a bit of praise for the quality and variety of activities, that it was recognized that this is a useful source of information and communication forum. And also there was a clear kind of understanding of the value of the Healthcare Professional Working Party and of the POG, the Policy Officer Group, as a forum of exchange. And in terms of the more moderately satisfied questions, the comments were a lot over kind of a wish to participate in, apologies, it still says CHMP, it should be HCPWP. So wish to participate in the working party activities, and also linked to the organization themselves' internal capacity, kind of maybe limiting the resources that could be dedicated to the work with EMA. So I have included a few of these questions, mostly the positive ones, but I think it's also interesting to see a little bit the nuance of the more negative comments that we receive, which were kind of linked to the possibility of having more specific communications, and also the possibility of somewhat participating in the selection of experts, of expertise within EMA. Then, moving on for the questions of the survey, we asked you how you would rate the value of being an eligible organization. And here again, we can see that the value is generally considered very high. There's no question about it, with all respondents answering either valuable or very valuable. And this is even a slight increase from the last survey, which I think is significant in the context that we find ourselves in, because the first survey was administered in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Since then, we've kind of, our mandate has been extended, and we really value the interaction with the healthcare professional organizations, and it's of relevance to us that this is also the case on the other side. Picking up a few of the reasons behind your perception of the value of being an EMA eligible organization. Obviously, we have community representation, the possibility of bringing kind of the perspective of the communities that you represent. That this is a useful forum for information exchange, that it offers the possibility of co-drafting scientific papers with EMA and also amongst members of the eligible amongst the other organizations, and then the participation in the healthcare professional working party. On the other side, what we observe is your interpretation of the value for us to kind of engage with our eligible organizations. In a way, it mirrors the same concept. So obviously, we get the possibility of having a discussion forum. We have access to healthcare professional expertise and the perspective of someone who kind of has a clinical day-to-day approach to the medicines that we work with. And also the possibility of kind of acting as multipliers for us about and raising awareness amongst your organizations and amongst your communities of our activities and information. So moving on, again, I've included a few of these comments that really kind of highlight that this is a constructive and mutually beneficial collaboration. And also, when we specifically ask you to identify the reasons why you engage with EMA, we kind of reflect similar outcomes. So clearly, the possibility of raising awareness of issues that are relevant to your organization within a forum such as the Healthcare Professional Working Party, and the opportunity to express your opinion and connect with EMA and staff. We also kind of appreciate other topics that were raised in some of the comments, in particular linked, for example, to the possibility of interacting amongst yourselves, early warning of shortages, a better understanding of real-life use of medicines, and so on and so forth. Now, looking at the topics of interest, I thought it was quite interested here to show this mapped against the topics of interest for patients and consumers organizations, because although there is some overlap, there is also there are also some differences, and in particular, you will see that patients and consumer organizations had expressed a much clearer preference towards topics like patient experience data, special populations, clinical trials, and this is not necessarily a value judgment, but it does reflect that although we are working towards a more multi-stakeholder approach, and I think one definitely made the case for this earlier, we do appreciate that there should be room for you to be able to air specific interests and needs separately. So one final point, if I manage to change the slide. So when asked about your preferred methodology for engagement, I think there was a preference towards multi-stakeholder workshops. A lot of you expressed a preference towards discussions at a healthcare professional working party and dedicated webinars, which I think is a reflection of the activities and the engagement methodologies that we are also kind of investing in within the department. And next slide. Finally, when asked about how you yourself promote the visibility of your interaction with EMA within your organization or outside your organization, it was clear that more and more we're going towards a kind of multi-channel promotion of our activities, with 59% of respondents highlighting that they use more than 3 channels to actually communicate to their memberships, but also beyond their memberships, and obviously with kind of a high percentage of respondents mentioning social media, as well as conferences and articles in scientific papers. So, final slide. I would like to kind of also include a few more comments. One is, first of all, a thank you from your side to us for the work in this in these working parties, and I think this is mirrored also from us to you, but also a kind of remark and reminder that the input that you provide to us should be reflected in EMA activities, and that you want to see also the impact of these activities. And this for us is really kind of a guiding principle when we are planning how to proceed in kind of creating new methodologies for engagement with you. So in conclusion, this year's survey counted a smaller participation than in 2020, but overall satisfaction levels were high and comments generally positive. Participants were mostly members of the Healthcare Professional Working Party. There appears to be a high recognized value of engaging with EMA for organizations, and positive remarks also of the importance of the Working Party work and of the POG. And to a certain extent, this reflects the agency's priorities as well as the work of this team. And a final point, there is obviously interest in regulatory and legislative content, which will be important moving forward also with the application of the new pharmaceutical legislation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. As said to Christopher, we are going to have a discussion, a global discussion at the end of the 3 presentation. So please hold on your question or comments. And now, always looking ahead, it's my pleasure to introduce Ivana Silva. I think that she is someone just hired by EMA. You never see her. And Ivana is going to present us the concept of reflecting on the need to review the EMA's framework of engagement with the healthcare professionals and their organization. Ivana, please.
Thank you very much. And I think I've said hello to most of you. If not, hello again. So yes, I think what we wanted to do with this part of the meeting is really to go a little bit into the metrics and what we've learned, so that we can shape a little bit the reflection on what potentially could be the need to revise the current framework of engagement with healthcare professional organizations. So if this works, it does. We have circulated in advance of the meeting a very high-level document, which I'm going to summarize in the coming slides, where we really try to put forward some points to consider so that the Working Party can support this reflection on where we are now with the current framework and why perhaps we need to consider a possible revision of the framework. So the framework that we have was the very first framework was, as Isabel reminded us, was first endorsed in 2011. We reviewed it in 2016, and we are now in 2023. So things have happened in the meantime. We've learned certain things, which I would like to share with you a little bit more in the next slides. And we have more experience, we have more matured interactions, and perhaps we need to integrate this further in the current context of the framework. We've seen recent developments, and we see more coming our direction, as we heard from Tony and as we heard from our past co-chairs. So the future is shaping up and at a much quicker pace. We also need to consider that we, as healthcare professionals, it's one of the stakeholders, but there are more, and there are more frameworks of interaction and of engagement with the patients, with industry, with academia. So how does this all align is important to reflect, and there has been some revisions, for example, to the patient and consumer engagement framework. So we need to see how these things may impact in the current framework of healthcare professionals. And also, we need to understand how to adjust to increased interest from many European health science students associations who also represent the future generations. And we've heard today that we also need to keep in mind that we need to introduce the regulatory work to new generations of healthcare professionals. And coming back from the discussions that were held in 2016 when the management board review and endorsed the review of the framework, at that time it was put forward why perhaps veterinarians would not be part of such a framework. And let's remind ourselves that the remit of the agency is medicines for human use and veterinary use, and that was very much the line of the management board. So this is all points for consider. In terms of what we've seen over the years, we've now have 10 years of implementing the framework, more than 10 years. And what we've seen throughout this decade is that we've seen an increased diversity and number of organizations which have gone through the voluntary process of being granted eligibility status. And we see healthcare professional organizations and clinical learned societies which have similar missions, but somehow different in some ways. We have organizations that are very focused on healthcare and public health, others that are more into clinical and research. We have different types of organizations. We have large alliances bringing together different types of organizations, of professional groups. We have organizations that are really specialized in a particular disease or condition, on particular therapeutic areas. We have organizations that represent professional groups. So it's quite diverse. And we've gone from 20 organizations in 2012 to 38 as I speak, and this number could increase. We've also seen that there is different types of interactions and different types of the maturity of that interaction over the years. So we need to cater for all of this. And we've seen that we have interacted with organizations in a very individualized manner. We also have then organized to have collaborations with groups of organizations that represent the same professional group. And we have the example of the collaboration with the organizations representing general practitioners. And then we also have the whole multidisciplinary approach and bringing all the different organizations to around the same aspect of a particular engagement. We also see that some organizations require more introductory approach to that engagement, and then we develop into highly technical and highly specialized aspects of interaction. And we've gone also from initially more policy and advocacy-oriented reasoning for approaching the agency to very specialized expertise and to the provision of very specialized expertise. And one key area that we also continue to learn is about really how to provide and make it more visible the impact of this engagement. And here is the discussion around the relevance and the challenges around monitoring continuously and reporting about the impact of this engagement, looking into qualitative and quantitative aspects. So all of these are learnings that we have gained and that we need to perhaps further discuss on how to incorporate this further in a framework of engagement. We keep this, and Juan presented this in terms of keeping our bigger picture on why are we doing this engagement and why do we need to bring all the different and very diverse organizations on board, we really have this aspect of we need to continuously map expectations and identify gaps in terms of how we are engaging with the organizations, what are the areas that are coming up in the future that will require additional expertise. We are now on the 4th mandate of the Working Party. We have now 2 satisfaction surveys that provide us information on the particular areas of interest. We have created in 2021, we've piloted a health policy officers group, which has provided additional intel and a complementary platform to the Working Party to exchange more information, more views, and gather more detail on the sort of topics that the organizations would like to develop together. And we continuously to have bilateral meetings with the organizations. We continue to gather information. More and more we have very nice requests to co-develop meetings, to participate in external events, also to provide training, but also to be to reach out for you if we also would like to have your expertise in other trainings that we may need for assessors, for example. So this continuously increases and it's really diverse. And it's aligned with the large areas that are included in the regulatory network strategy. So all on the adding on, we also have 10 years of this Working Party, and we've gone throughout the day in terms of understanding what we've seen. And I think one of the things we need to consider is really what is the strategic position we all want this Working Party to take in relation to the different structures of the agency. We've seen that this Working Party developed from a more informal working group and is now an EMA working party, which is cross-committee. We have the different members of representing all the different scientific committees also part of this working party. So I think that is quite unique also for us and for the PCWP, and it's something we need to continuously remind ourselves, how do we bring this and benefit more of this. We also have the interactions with our counterpart of the Patient and Consumer Working Party. And we've seen that we have more and more joint meetings, and I've heard today that this is much appreciated and that the joint discussions are important, but we also need space for more individualized and more targeted discussions within each working party. We are seeing more and more the consolidation of the work with the scientific committees, and the scientific committees would like to consult more with the working parties. I just put here 2 examples which are more recent, and we've seen, for example, for the PRAC, we have a pilot ongoing. It's a pilot working group on enhancing engagement with patients and healthcare professionals, what we call PRISMA, and I have Priya in the room. She's leading on this, and this is really very much to bring more the views of patients and healthcare professionals into the work of PRAC. And we also have very recently launched the early contact with the CHMP, where we are contacting healthcare professional organizations on day 1 of the evaluation of specific medicines. So it's really very early engagement to bring on board the perspectives of healthcare professional organizations. So it's really shaping more and more, and it's very solid. And finally, I think it's important that we've learned recently that there has been a reorganization of EMA's working parties. You've heard from Tony that the proposed new legislation really is moving into a more dynamic sort of organization of the agency, where the PRAC and CHMP will be supported by a working party. So this is something that we would need to further explore. So there's more learnings. We've also seen over the years that we could work in different ways, that we cannot do everything during our meetings. We meet 4 times a year, jointly mostly, and we can't possibly think that we can dive deep in everything in 4 meetings. So we've experimented with different things. We have had topic groups, and you may recall, some of you, the topic group on academia, learned society, societies and healthcare professional organizations, which provided recommendations and led to by then the framework of collaboration with academia. And the revised framework of healthcare professionals. We had another topic group on projects on information on medicines, and another one on risk minimization measures and assessment of their effectiveness. And all of these topic groups led to recommendations that then shaped work internally at the agency. We've seen now more recently, I've mentioned the healthcare professionals working policy officers group. And this is also, we piloted, and we have 2 more years of this group, and we will assess by the end of this year. There's certainly some learnings, there's things that we can improve. But again, this is part of really bottom-up understanding how organizations want to work and want to engage further. So there's more. There's other things, of course, we've already heard today, and Uli, this is for you, right? Because we've learned a lot about how to engage during a public health crisis, and unfortunately, we can't say whether we're going to have the next one. So hopefully, we don't want any, but life happens, and what we've learned through this is that it is really important, the engagement with the organizations, because we quickly can pool efforts for coordinated communication and addressing misinformation. And it's really about how to adapt to disruption in our normal practices and how to reprioritize our work streams. And this is something that we need to understand. How do we incorporate this in the way of working? Because at any time, this can happen, and we need to be ready. And then it's also this aspect of really using the organizations to reach out to experts and to pull experts and ensure that we can do this in the most expedite manner, and that we can bring independent expertise, and also remind ourselves that we really want to bring more and more new generations of healthcare professionals into the regulatory work. So, almost done. What we've seen, we've seen recent developments. I'm not going to go through these because they've been already addressed by the different presentations we've heard today and the different interventions we heard today, but just that we keep this in mind. I've mentioned about aligning with other frameworks for engagement. We are not alone. We have aspects that we need to target more specifically to healthcare professionals, but we have to see this in a multi-stakeholder context. To conclude all this blah blah that I'm trying to share with you, is that what are we going to do next? So our proposal is that we have a moment where we need to reflect. Are we happy with the framework that we have? Do we need to change it? And if we need to change it, how? And so what we would like to hear from you is that, taking into account that you are assuming you have read the high-level document we share with you, if you think that everything is already there, we would like to give you some time for giving your feedback in writing to us on whether you are happy with the points to consider. And you will receive a very short survey, 2 questions, where basically we are going to ask you, do you think the framework is still valid? Yes, no, partially. And if so, what do we need to consider in addition to the points to consider we have already shared with you? So those are the 2 questions. So it's very quick. After that, on that basis, we're going to, and if you tell us that indeed you think there are some aspects of the framework that need to be considered further, we will make a proposal of revised text, and then we will go for a wider consultation. So this is very much the idea here, and we would like to have from you a sense of direction if you think this is something worth undertaking, and if so, we will do it with these steps proposed here. So that's it, Rosa. Thank you.